The world held its breath as a trade storm erupted, threatening to reshape the global economic landscape. The re-election of President Donald Trump in November 2024 served as the catalyst for escalating tensions between the United States and Canada, unfolding in a series of tariff follies and retaliatory measures, plunging both nations into a state of economic uncertainty and diplomatic strain. It all began on November 25, 2024, when Trump declared his intention to impose a 25% tariff on all goods imported from Canada and Mexico, citing their alleged failure to secure their borders with the U.S. In the same statement, he also pledged a 10% tariff on Chinese imports, urging Beijing to curb the production of illicit fentanyl destined for America. The reaction was swift, with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau condemning the move as reckless and unwarranted, warning that it would have dire consequences for both economies. Despite Canada's attempts to defuse the tensions, on January 20, 2025, Trump signed a memorandum directing his cabinet to assess what he termed a national emergency caused by illegal immigration and fentanyl flows from Canada, Mexico, and China. The memo strongly encouraged government officials to develop responsive trade and defense measures, leaving little doubt about the imminent imposition of tariffs. And on February 1, 2025, Donald Trump signed an executive order imposing 25% duties on goods from Mexico and Canada, along with a 10% tariff on Chinese imports. The White House was quick to announce that the new tariffs would take effect as early as February 4. In response, Justin Trudeau issued a sharp statement vowing that Canada would respond with mirror measures, levying tariffs on $30 billion Canadian dollars worth of American goods, and would further escalate countermeasures to $125 billion Canadian dollars within weeks. Amid growing anxiety over the potential economic fallout, on February 3, Trump unexpectedly announced a one-month delay in the imposition of tariffs for Canada and Mexico, citing the achievement of separate agreements with both countries. Canada pledged to strengthen border security and appoint a point person to combat fentanyl, while Mexico, in turn, vowed to deploy additional troops to its northern border. Despite the brief respite for North American trade, the United States, as scheduled, imposed 10% tariffs on goods imported from China on February 4. However, as the reprieve neared its end, tensions once again reached a boiling point. On February 27, President Trump reaffirmed his intent to impose 25% tariffs against Canada and Mexico once the suspension expired on March 4, along with an additional 10% levy on Chinese imports. The following day, Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau slammed the measures, calling them unacceptable and punitive, and promised a mirror response from Canada. By March 3, an atmosphere of anticipation of a full-blown trade war virtually paralyzed the markets. Speaking at the White House, the head of the American administration confirmed that the tariffs would take effect exactly at midnight. Wall Street's reaction was immediate. The S&P 500 reacted with an immediate drop, closing the trading day down 1.7%, its most significant drop since December. And so, at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on March 4, the tariffs officially came into effect. The trade war erupted almost instantly, with Canada and China announcing retaliatory measures, promising further economic countermeasures. The reaction to the decision to impose tariffs was swift, with Prime Minister Trudeau sharply condemning the move, calling it short-sighted and destructive. In response, Canada immediately imposed mirror 25% tariffs on a wide range of American exports, targeting key U.S. industries such as agriculture, manufacturing, and consumer goods. In contrast to Canada's hardline stance, Mexico adopted a more restrained position. President Claudia Sheinbaum criticized the imposed tariffs but opted to postpone immediate retaliation, betting on direct negotiations with Donald Trump. The uncertainty arising from the trade measures led to another drop in American stocks, as investors expressed concerns about possible prolonged economic instability. In a sudden turn of events on March 5, Trump delayed the imposition of automobile tariffs for 1 month. This followed intensive lobbying by major U.S. automakers, including General Motors and Stellantis, parent company of Jeep and Chrysler, who warned of serious disruptions to supply chains. The move brought temporary relief to the markets, triggering a stock market recovery and pushing major indices higher by the end of the trading day. But already on March 6, Donald Trump softened his position, signing an order to suspend tariffs on goods covered by the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA. However, despite this move, financial markets continued to show signs of concern. The S&P 500 again fell by 2% and the Nasdaq lost 2.5%, indicating the continuing nervousness of investors concerned about the unpredictability of trade policy. In this situation, the future of trade relations between the U.S. and Canada remains shrouded in uncertainty. Companies on both sides of the border are forced to maneuver in the face of rapidly changing political circumstances, and political leaders are carefully weighing their next steps. The question of whether a long-term solution can be found or whether the parties will continue to move along a spiral of tariffs and retaliatory measures remains open. Canada seems determined to fight back. In response to the actions of the American administration, Ottawa is preparing unprecedented countermeasures. Ontario Premier Doug Ford announced the introduction of a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the United States, starting March 10. This measure will affect about 1.5 million American homes and businesses in states such as Michigan, New York, and Minnesota, which depend on electricity supplies from Ontario. In response to the imposition of duties on Canadian goods by the United States, Ontario Premier Doug Ford announced his readiness to take tough measures to protect the economic interests of the province. Ford did not rule out the possibility of stopping electricity exports to the U.S., emphasizing that he would not hesitate to take this step if the situation demanded it. Amid growing tensions over the Trump administration's imposition of 25% tariffs on Canadian exports and 10% duties on energy, the Ontario government is considering various response options. These measures could seriously affect key industries such as automotive and steel production, as well as lead to higher retail prices. At a press conference, Premier Ford confirmed his determination to defend Ontario's interests. He warned that the province could suspend electricity exports to states critically dependent on Canadian supplies, such as New York, Michigan, and Minnesota. If they try to destroy Ontario, I will do everything I can, including turning off their power, Ford said, adding the statement with a smile. In the tense atmosphere gripping Canadian society, echoes of harsh rhetoric are clearly heard, reflecting deep concern about the looming threat of economic consequences caused by the Trump administration's trade policy. As the country prepares for a possible storm, the province of Ontario, the industrial heart of Canada, is considering a wide range of responses, extending far beyond the energy sector. The Premier of the province, Doug Ford, announced his readiness to take tough measures, proposing to introduce an additional fee for each megawatt of electricity exported to the United States. This initiative, aimed at increasing the financial costs for American consumers and businesses, could be a tangible blow to the economic interests of the southern neighbor. Moreover, Ford did not rule out the possibility of terminating a $100 million contract with Elon Musk's company, Starlink, and even threatened to seize all American alcoholic products from retail outlets controlled by the Liquor Control Board of Ontario, LCBO, if new tariffs were introduced. The economic consequences of such measures could be very serious. Analysts warn of a potential wave of job cuts and increased consumer spending across Canada. In this regard, the Ontario government, anticipating the looming difficulties, has already allocated more than $40 billion in emergency economic assistance, including the creation of a special protection fund of $5 billion, the provision of tax deferrals, wage subsidies, and direct financial support to municipalities. Preventive measures of financial support taken by the Ontario government clearly demonstrate the seriousness of the current trade conflict and awareness of its potential consequences for business and employment in the province. Despite these precautions, Ontario Premier Doug Ford recognizes the unpredictability of further steps by the American president, noting that even Donald Trump himself may not have a clear idea of his plans. This statement reflects the fog and uncertainty surrounding the trade policy of the United States under the current administration. While businesses on both sides of the border are holding their breath in anticipation of the official introduction of new tariffs, the federal government of Canada has also promised to provide an adequate response to any actions by the United States. Doug Ford has expressed full support for the dollar-for-dollar strategy, implying mirroring any trade measures taken by the United States with equivalent countermeasures. The Premier of Ontario did not elaborate on specific provincial tariffs. However, his readiness for decisive action indicates that Ontario is prepared to escalate the conflict if necessary. Meanwhile, Canadian Member of Parliament Charlie Angus has openly criticized the recent U.S. trade policies and the rhetoric of President Donald Trump towards Canada. In response to the protectionist measures initiated by the Trump administration, Angus, a prominent political figure, has called on Canadian citizens to demonstrate economic patriotism by boycotting goods manufactured in the United States. According to Angus, in the face of escalating tensions in trade relations between the two countries, priority should be given to supporting domestic businesses and reducing dependence on imports from the U.S. This call is a striking manifestation of Angus's firm stance in protecting Canada's economic interests. Furthermore, Angus has firmly refuted the absurd suggestions about the possible annexation of Canada and its inclusion into the United States as the 51st state. He emphasized that such ideas have no basis and reaffirmed his unwavering commitment to the sovereignty and independence of his country. In a recent interview, Angus stated that Canada is a proud and independent nation with a unique identity and rejects any attempts to undermine its independence. Underscoring his opposition to the policies of the current American administration, Angus has initiated a parliamentary petition calling on the Canadian government to prevent President Trump from participating in the upcoming G7 summit scheduled for June. This move is further evidence of his disapproval of the political course and rhetoric pursued by Trump towards Canada. It is worth noting that the United States, as one of the world's leading economies, is heavily dependent on imports in key sectors that ensure its growth and stability. This includes energy resources, raw materials, food, beverages, and skilled labor. International trade has long served as the backbone of the United States economy, but in the era of President Donald Trump and his America First doctrine, these ties have been severely tested. The administration, seeking to support domestic producers, has enacted tariffs and trade restrictions affecting both allies and competitors, including Canada, the European Union, and China. While such policies aim to protect American industry and resonate with those who advocate national interests, they often overlook the complex global supply chains that have been formed over decades in an environment of globalization. The U.S. does not just import consumer goods, it is highly dependent on foreign resources such as crude oil, rare earth minerals, electricity, and other vital materials necessary for industrial and technological development. Moreover, international expertise plays a crucial role in maintaining the country's leadership in innovation and scientific research. In response to the tariffs imposed by the Trump administration, Canada is considering unconventional countermeasures that extend far beyond standard trade sanctions. Among the most discussed proposals is limiting the export of oil and electricity to the United States. Such a move could seriously disrupt established energy supply chains, given Canada's key role in meeting U.S. energy needs. Such actions could have far-reaching consequences, especially for those industries whose operations are critically dependent on a stable power supply. In addition to this, Canada is exploring the possibility of imposing restrictions on the export of other strategically important resources, such as rare earth elements and natural gas, which play an indispensable role in a wide range of industries, from the defense industry to the renewable energy sector. Statistics for 2024 showed that the United States imported approximately $129.185 billion worth of energy resources from Canada, making it the country's largest energy supplier. This impressive figure includes 1.46 billion barrels of crude oil worth $16.8 billion and 271 billion cubic feet of natural gas worth $10.8 billion. Substantial amounts of energy cross the border between the U.S. and Canada. Specifically, the United States imported 37 terawatt-hours of electricity valued at $1.85 billion and 10 million pounds of uranium worth $0.4 billion. However, crude oil constitutes the lion's share of these imports, further emphasizing Canada's importance to U.S. energy security. Recognizing its over-reliance on the American market, Canada is actively diversifying its oil export destinations, turning its attention to the rapidly growing Far East, including China and Japan. This shift has been driven by both trade disputes and the prospect of U.S. tariffs. In early 2024, the completion of the Trans-Mountain Expansion Pipeline, known as TMEX, played a crucial role in redirecting Canadian crude oil to Asian markets. This strategically important facility connects the oil-rich province of Alberta to the Pacific coast, opening a direct route for supplies to countries such as China, Japan, and South Korea. By September 2024, refineries in Japan and South Korea, as well as a refinery in Brunei, had received their first shipments of Canadian oil transported via the new TMEX pipeline. Alberta's energy sector is experiencing a period of rapid growth in Asian markets. For the first 11 months of 2024, energy exports from this Canadian province to China reached an impressive $2 billion, marking a five-fold increase compared to the same period last year. Crude oil exports accounted for the bulk of the surge, skyrocketing from virtually zero to $1.8 billion. However, China is not the only promising partner for Alberta in Asia. Japan is also increasingly asserting itself as a key destination for Canadian energy exports. In February 2025, Alberta's Minister of Environment and Protected Areas, Rebecca Schultz, emphasized the strategic importance of strengthening ties with the Japanese market. This move is seen as a prudent precaution against potential threats from U.S. tariffs aimed at diversifying sales channels for Alberta's natural gas and crude oil. Notably, even the United States, as one of the world's largest energy producers, continues to rely on imports to meet the energy needs of various regions and industries. These imports cover a wide range of resources, including crude oil, natural gas, electricity, coal, and uranium. In this complex system, Canada plays an indispensable role ensuring a stable supply of these vital resources to various U.S. states. In 2024, the United States imported an average of 6.1 million barrels of crude oil per day, with Canada playing a key role in meeting this demand. The North American country supplied over 4 million barrels per day, accounting for an impressive 67% of total U.S. crude oil imports. This significant volume was mainly transported via major pipelines such as Keystone XL and Enbridge Mainline, reaching critical refineries located in several states. Illinois, with its strategically located refineries in Chicago and Joliet, processes a significant portion of Canadian crude oil, converting it into fuel and other essential products. Texas, the energy heart of America, receives heavy oil through complex pipeline networks, including the famous Keystone pipeline system, ensuring a stable supply for its refining operations. Minnesota also benefits from the reliable Enbridge Mainline system, which delivers crude oil to refineries in St. Paul, supporting the state's economic activity and energy security. Michigan and Ohio, located in the heart of the Midwest, receive Canadian oil through the same extensive network, which supplies refineries in Detroit and Toledo. These states rely heavily on Canadian crude oil for their refining operations, which in turn supply gasoline, diesel, and other petroleum products not only throughout the Midwest but also on a broader scale. This interconnected supply system underscores the importance of Canadian oil to the U.S. energy infrastructure and economy. The role of natural gas imports from Canada should not be underestimated, as in 2024, the United States received 8.5 billion cubic feet of this resource daily, with the lion's share 7.4 billion cubic feet coming from Canadian supplies. This energy flow is vital to the Midwest and Northeast, providing a reliable energy supply for heating homes, operating power plants, and powering industrial facilities. States like New York and the New England region, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine are particularly dependent on Canadian gas during the winter months when heating demands peak. Illinois and Michigan also rely on these supplies to keep homes warm and support industrial processes. Northern states such as Minnesota, North Dakota, and Wisconsin use Canadian gas for electricity generation and to support manufacturing facilities. These stable supplies from the North play a crucial role in maintaining U.S. energy security, especially in regions with harsh climates. Beyond oil and gas, electricity imports from Canada are another vital element of U.S. energy stability. In 2024, the U.S. imported approximately 39 terawatt-hours of electricity, with 95% of that volume coming from Canada. This cross-border electricity trade helps balance regional supply and demand, particularly in states with direct connections to the Canadian power grid. The energy ties between the U.S. and Canada are strengthening, bringing tangible benefits to both sides. New York, for example, is increasingly utilizing hydropower from Quebec in its efforts to move away from fossil fuels. This strategic move not only reduces reliance on traditional energy sources but also paves the way for a greener future. Vermont and other New England states also rely on electricity supplies from Hydro-Quebec. These imports play a vital role in ensuring the stability of the regional power grid, especially during peak demand periods. Furthermore, Canadian hydropower effectively complements local renewable sources, creating a balanced and sustainable energy mix. In turn, Michigan imports electricity from Ontario to meet peak demand, ensuring that businesses and households have a reliable energy supply even during the most strained times. Minnesota and North Dakota also use Canadian hydropower to maintain the stable operation of their power grids, demonstrating mutually beneficial cooperation between the countries. Despite the decline in U.S. coal imports, Canada remains a supplier of this resource. In 2024, U.S. coal imports totaled 4 million short tons, with supplies coming from Canada, Colombia, and Indonesia. Canadian coal plays an important role in meeting the industrial and energy needs of Michigan, while Minnesota uses some of these imports for steel production. Some coal is also supplied to New England, although its importance in the region's energy balance is gradually decreasing as greener alternatives are developed and implemented. Canada plays a key role in U.S. energy security by supplying uranium, which is necessary for the operation of American nuclear power plants. In 2024, the U.S. imported 50 million pounds of this strategic raw material, with Canada providing 20% of the total volume. This uranium is vital for nuclear reactors located in several states. Illinois stands out in particular as it has the largest number of nuclear power plants in the country. South Carolina and North Carolina also rely heavily on Canadian uranium to maintain the operation of their nuclear facilities. Pennsylvania, another major producer of nuclear energy, benefits from stable supplies of this fuel. Tennessee, home to uranium processing and enrichment facilities, ensures the continuity of the production cycle. It is noteworthy that despite such significant dependence on Canadian energy imports, the Trump administration at one time imposed tariffs on Canadian goods. The justification cited was concerns related to drug trafficking and illegal immigration, which caused bewilderment given the close energy ties between the two countries. Despite the ominous statements, the facts suggest otherwise. Only a negligible proportion of illicit substances, particularly the deadly fentanyl, enters the U.S. from Canadian territory. This dissonance suggests that the administration's trade policy pursues goals that are not publicly disclosed. Officially, the imposition of duties is explained by the need to stop illegal migration and drug trafficking, primarily fentanyl supplies. However, the hard numbers show that Canada accounts for only about 0.2% of the fentanyl entering the U.S. The main flow of the drug comes from China and Mexico. The sincerity of the administration's motives in justifying draconian tariffs on Canadian goods is questioned. As a more likely reason, experts cite the desire to establish control over the richest natural resources and strategically important territories of the neighboring country. Canada possesses colossal reserves of minerals, oil, and natural gas, which are critical to the American economy. Canada's geographical location provides the United States with a strategic advantage in the Arctic, a region where geopolitical interests are steadily increasing. This is due to pristine natural resources and new sea routes emerging from melting Arctic ice. National security issues also play a significant role. By incorporating Canada, the United States could eliminate its northern border, potentially simplifying defense logistics and fostering a unified North American position. This idea aligns with historical doctrines emphasizing the importance of continental security and may underlie the administration's rhetoric regarding possible annexation. On the domestic political front, threats of annexation can serve as a political tool to mobilize nationalistic sentiments among the American electorate. By taking a tough stance on trade and border security issues, the administration seeks to strengthen its political base, divert attention from internal problems, and create an image of a decisive player on the world stage. It is likely that talk of annexation is merely a heavy-handed tactic in a political game, a way to force Ottawa to concede in trade disputes and other issues where the two countries' positions diverge. The administration, as if brandishing a sword, is trying to create a situation in which the Canadian side has to give way to avoid the worst. According to experts, a larger strategy may be hidden behind these trade maneuvers. It is believed that tariffs are part of a plan to tie Canada to the economic and geopolitical interests of the United States. This is confirmed by President Trump's repeated statements about annexing Canada and turning it into the 51st state, linking the lifting of tariffs to this scenario. That concludes our broadcast. Thank you for your attention. We are delighted to have had you with us today. If you enjoyed our content, please support us with a like and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with new releases. Your support is very important to us. Take a look at the screen and you will see another fascinating piece of content prepared by our team. We are confident that it will arouse no less interest in you and may become a starting point for new discovery.